When I first stepped into the halls of power, the great men laughed. She is a moment, not a movement. I smiled, carried their books, took their notes. And when their empires crumbled into sands and their banners faded from even the memory of stone, it was my laws, my songs, and my architecture that historians still spoke of, centuries after their last sons forgot how to spell their own names. I never thought I'd end up in politics. I grew up in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Working-class family. My mom cleaned offices. My dad worked at the rail yard until he got hurt. We didn't talk about government unless we were cursing it. But I was a good kid. Quiet. Watched everything. Learned fast. I got out the only way I knew how: scholarships. I worked 2 jobs, studied harder than anyone else, and graduated top of my class from Penn State. Then I got into Penn Law. I wanted to change things. I wanted to be useful. Maybe help people like my parents, who never caught a break. After law school, I landed an internship in Harrisburg. The Capitol building was more marble and gold than I ever imagined. I remember the first time I walked into those giant halls. It felt like walking into a church built for men who never had to kneel. They didn't see me as a threat. Just another girl in a blazer. I was 26. No political family. No connections. Just a resume, a fake smile, and a brain I kept hidden under polite silence. They placed me in the office of Senator Gerald Quayle. That man thought he was God. Gerald had been in the Senate since before I was born. He had that old-school politician thing: slick hair, thick glasses, the same gray suit every day, like a uniform of power. He never carried his own papers. He never checked his own emails. He had people for that. I became one of them. The first thing he said to me in front of the committee staff was, "Here's our new aide. Sabine something. Ivy League type. Let's try not to scare her off with too much real work." Everyone laughed. I smiled, bit my tongue. He called me his girl when introducing me. I held his files, fetched his lunch, listened to his rants about damn kids on Twitter, and bleeding heart environmentalists. I nodded, took notes. I stayed late. Read every policy, every memo, every contract. I learned who controlled what, who owed who, and which nonprofits were just fronts. The first time he asked me to rewrite a speech, I did it so well that a national paper quoted a line. He grinned like it was his own. I said nothing. That's how it was for years. I worked like hell and he took the credit. He got richer, more powerful. I got respected, sort of, but never seen as equal. Then he stole something that mattered. It was year 3. I had spent 6 months putting together a 200-page policy on infrastructure reform. No more shady contracts. Oversight committees with teeth. Clean energy transitions. It was smart. It was airtight. I was proud of it. Gerald submitted it under his name. He won an award. Huge one. National press. Front page stories. Visionary policy leadership. They handed him a medal in D.C. I stood in the back row during the ceremony, clapping while my throat burned. Afterward, I went to his office and shut the door. "That paper was mine," I said. My voice shook. "You submitted it under your name. Without telling me." He leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Sabine, that's how politics works. Don't take it personally." That was the moment something broke in me. I went home that night and I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling. I thought about every coffee I poured, every memo I corrected, every laugh I had to fake. I decided I wasn't going to quit. I was going to burn it all down. I started building my plan. Not overnight. Slowly. Carefully. Like a spider weaving something deadly. I stayed in my job. I acted normal. But I began keeping records, real records. Every shady conversation. Every sketchy deal. I used a burner phone. I kept hard copies in a safe deposit box under a different name. I stopped asking questions. I started listening harder. Gerald was messy. He thought being in power made him untouchable. He let his guard down around me. I was his girl, after all. Just another assistant who didn't know better. He didn't notice I was copying contracts that were routed through shell companies. He didn't notice I kept a log of every donor meeting he lied about attending. He didn't know I was collecting names, dates, even recorded calls from his own staffers who hated him as much as I did. By year 5, I had enough dirt to make the entire Harrisburg establishment sweat. And I was just getting started. You'd be surprised how many people hate the man they work for. Gerald's staff? They loathed him. He yelled, mocked, humiliated them in front of interns. One of his junior policy guys, Evan, once got called a waste of oxygen because he mispronounced constituent in a meeting. Afterward, he sat in the stairwell and cried. I started helping Evan. At first, it was just calming him down. Then I gave him tips. I told him what documents to look for, what emails to forward to me. He didn't ask questions. He just wanted to feel useful. I made sure he knew I respected him because nobody else did. He was the first crack. Others followed. The chief scheduler? Bitter after a pay cut. The legislative director? Passed over for a promotion he earned. I gave them all something Gerald never did, credit. And soon they were handing me more than gossip. They gave me raw files. Text messages. Copies of things Gerald thought were destroyed. And then there was the affair. Her name was Arlene Kemp. She was 24, just out of college, working as a press assistant in another office. Gerald called her Lena. He liked her blonde hair, and the way she laughed at his stories. What he didn't like was when she got scared. And she did after he started texting at 2 a.m., showing up uninvited to her apartment, grabbing her arm during an argument in the hallway. I found her crying in the women's bathroom. No makeup, hands shaking. He said he could ruin me, she whispered. He said no one would believe me anyway. He was right about the old system. But I wasn't part of that system anymore. I gave Arlene a choice. Go to HR and be buried. Or let me help her tell her story carefully. Anonymously at first. Through one of the reporters I knew personally, someone I'd fed smaller stories to before, someone who owed me. She chose to fight. That's when things started falling apart for Gerald. The infrastructure contract scandal hit first. It was about a bridge outside Wilkes-Barre that collapsed during a rainstorm. 2 people died. Investigators found corners had been cut. Gerald had fast-tracked the contract through a shell company owned by one of his donors. And I had all the paperwork. I leaked it in pieces, first to a local paper, then to a watchdog group, then to a rival campaign who turned it into an ad. Gerald denied everything, blamed staffers. Then the texts leaked. Not just to Arlene, to 3 other women over a span of 10 years. Threats, promises, drunken slurs. I made sure they were leaked to the right people. Not just reporters, but to state ethics boards, women's rights groups, and his biggest donors. Within weeks, 3 major backers dropped him. His campaign manager quit on live TV. Protesters started showing up to every event. I watched it all from my office with the door closed, drinking bad coffee and taking notes. I wasn't done yet. Gerald called me one night. Drunk. You think this is funny, don't you? He slurred into the phone. You and your girl power shit. You think they'll let someone like you run this town? I didn't answer. Just listened. You're nothing, Sabine. A good moment, maybe. But you're not the movement. Then he hung up. I sat there for a while, staring at the wall. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I'd heard worse. From better men. I made a choice right then. I was going to run for state senate. In the same district Gerald had ruled for 30 years. Not just to beat him. To replace him. To show everyone that the shadow he cast wasn't big enough to hide me anymore. And I had allies now. People who'd seen what I'd done. People who'd been stepped on too. I wasn't just going to run. I was going to win. My campaign launch was quiet. No big money, no big names. Just me, a few volunteers, and a rented storefront off Walnut Street in downtown Harrisburg. We painted the walls ourselves. We made phone calls until our throats went raw. My first fundraising dinner was in the back of a pizza place. 17 people showed up, most of them angry retirees. I told the truth. I worked under the man who broke this district, I said. I carried his lies until they nearly broke me too. Now I'm done carrying. The applause was polite, but it was a start. Gerald didn't take it seriously at first. He told the press I was having a quarter-life crisis. He laughed at my name in op-eds. Said I was trying to cash in on a scandal I barely understood. What he didn't know was that I still had more. There was a file I hadn't touched. A red folder with 4 documents. Proof of embezzlement from a state redevelopment grant. Fake companies. Fake jobs. $500,000 that disappeared, reappeared in a pack under his brother-in-law's name, and then got funneled into a lake house outside Scranton. It wasn't just dirty. It was federal. I had a choice. Leak it to the feds quietly or go nuclear. I chose both. I gave copies to the State Ethics Commission anonymously, but I also gave it to a local veteran reporter who had lost his brother to that same collapsed bridge. He ran the full story with names, dates, and a timeline that ended in Gerald's personal signature. The morning the article hit, Gerald didn't come to the Capitol. By noon, his lawyer had issued a statement. By 5, the FBI raided his Harrisburg condo. But even rats fight hardest when the water's rising. Gerald blamed me publicly, said I had deepfake files, and that I was part of a leftist smear job. He started pushing stories about my time in law school, tried to twist old texts from a college boyfriend into something scandalous. He had people follow my volunteers. He paid a blogger to write that I was unstable, vindictive, and possibly a communist. One of my staffers, Maria, had her car broken into. Just her campaign documents were stolen. Nothing else. No arrests. Then one day, I came home and my front door was open. Nothing was taken. Nothing was broken. Just open. I slept with a baseball bat beside my bed that week. I didn't stop. I held town halls, answered every question, took every jab. I walked every block, knocked on doors, shook hands. Old women held my wrist and said, "Make them pay." A teenage girl in a hoodie told me, "You're the first one I've ever seen who looks pissed for the right reasons." That stuck with me. Pissed for the right reasons. That became my campaign motto. Then something happened I didn't see coming. 2 weeks before the primary, a woman came into my office. She was in her 50s, hair dyed red, thick glasses. She looked nervous. She said, "I used to work for Gerald, back in the 90s. I nodded, not sure where this was going. She pulled out a worn envelope. Inside were 3 Polaroids, a letter, and a receipt from an old campaign event. This was the night he told me to keep quiet. He said my brother would lose his state job if I didn't. I froze. The pictures showed Gerald with a much younger staffer. She wasn't smiling. One picture had him gripping her wrist. Hard. Her face was turned away, like she was crying. The letter was her official complaint. Never filed. The receipt showed it happened in a state-paid hotel room. She said, "I don't want money. I just want someone to finally believe me." I asked if she'd go on record. She looked at me, then the photos. "Yes. If it helps you stop him, yes." I realized then this wasn't just about me anymore. It never really was. It was about every voice he silenced. Every life he stepped on. I wasn't running for revenge anymore. I was running for them too. The last month of the campaign turned into war. The night after that woman, Deborah was her name, agreed to go public, someone spray-painted the words liar and bitch on our campaign office windows. We cleaned it up before the morning volunteers showed. I didn't say a word about it to the press. I just posted a photo of us wiping down the glass, with a caption that said, "Not stopping." The photos and letter from Deborah ran in the Tribune that Sunday. They included her interview. She spoke calmly, clearly. Said she'd been waiting 25 years to be heard. My face wasn't even in the article. That was the point. Gerald's face was. His campaign went into meltdown. Donors stopped answering calls. His comms team quit. He canceled public appearances and holed up in his home outside Mechanicsburg. And still I wasn't sure I'd win. Election night. I was in the back of a packed community center. Folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, and my whole team standing shoulder to shoulder in worn-out shirts. I had spent the past 4 weeks surviving on adrenaline and stress dreams. The numbers trickled in slowly. Gerald led early. He always did. Mail-in ballots from wealthier areas broke his way. I watched the TV screens in silence. Everyone around me started whispering, "He's up 12 points. He always wins Cumberland County. Should we call the lawyer now or wait?" I just stared ahead. Then the city results came in. Harrisburg. Then York. Then the rest of Dauphin. I started to close the gap. Then came the rural counties where Gerald had enemies he'd forgotten. The lead vanished. Then I was ahead. The final tally came after midnight. I won. By 1,733 votes.
No speeches.
Just a single sentence. We did it the right way. Gerald didn't call to concede. Didn't send a letter. Didn't show his face again. 3 weeks later, he was indicted on multiple charges: fraud, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. He tried to delay the trial. Claimed memory loss. The judge didn't buy it. His mugshot was on the front page of every paper in the state. He looked nothing like the man I met years ago. Bloated, gray, broken. I visited Deborah the next day. She cried. Then hugged me. Told me to keep going. I promised her I would. Being a state senator wasn't glamorous. Most days were long meetings, angry constituents, and fighting off lobbyists. But I pushed every bill I swore I would. Oversight laws passed by one vote. Energy reforms scraped through. A public ethics board got funding for the first time in decades. People started calling me the Hammer. I didn't mind. But the longer I stayed, the more I saw who I was becoming. I fired Evan, my old friend, after he tried to push a contract to his cousin's firm without bidding. He cried, said he thought I'd protect him. I told him I wasn't Gerald. I watched him walk out without saying goodbye. Then came Maria. She asked me not to support a housing bill. Said it would gut funding for a shelter she used to volunteer at. She begged me. I voted for it anyway. It was the right bill overall, but it hurt her. She left the campaign a week later. Said I changed. She wasn't wrong. Years passed. Gerald died in federal prison. Stroke. No funeral notice.
No obit.
No one claimed the body for 2 days. His family didn't show. I heard a rumor one of his sons had legally changed his last name. That night I walked alone past the Capitol steps. The same place I once carried his briefcase, where they laughed at me for being a moment. A reporter stopped me. Said historians were calling my reform package the West Doctrine. Asked if I ever imagined this. I told her the truth.
No.
I just wanted him to choke on my name. I got what I wanted. I won. But I gave up pieces of myself to do it. I still hear my dad's voice sometimes telling me, "Don't become what you hate, Sabine." I didn't. Not exactly. But I understand now how easy it is to cross the line when you start on fire and end up in marble halls. My name's carved on walls now, but I still remember how it felt to be invisible. And I never let them forget it.